Throughout history, there have been many cautionary tales about the destructive power of an unchecked temper. These stories aren't just dramatic, they reveal a simple truth. Even a small spark of anger, if left uncontrolled, can burn down an entire life. Take, for example, the story of Duke Zhuang during the spring and autumn period. He was a man born into privilege. Wealth, status, authority. He had everything most people could only dream of. By all accounts, he could have lived a long and prosperous life. But there was one flaw he never addressed: his explosive temper. One day, he noticed something trivial, a puddle of urine in the courtyard. Instead of brushing it off or calmly asking about it, he immediately flew into a rage. His emotions took over before any facts were known. A servant, fearing punishment, lied and claimed that a visiting foreign guest was responsible, without verifying the truth. Without pausing even for a moment, Duke Zhuang ordered the guest to be arrested. Soon after, he was told that the guest had already fled. That was all it took. His anger surged even higher. In a fit of rage, he slammed his hand down with such force that he lost his balance and fell into a burning stove nearby. The result was devastating. He suffered severe burns. The wounds became infected, and eventually, those injuries led to his death. All of this from a single moment of uncontrolled anger. There's an old proverb: a fire that starts from a small branch, if not extinguished, will burn the entire field. Anger works the same way. It rarely begins as something big. It starts small: an irritation, a misunderstanding, a wounded ego. But if you don't put it out early, it grows. And once it grows, it becomes much harder to control. Another story from history reinforces this point. During the Tang Dynasty, there was an official named Wang Fuxi. He was incredibly talented, intelligent, capable, and full of potential. On paper, he had everything needed to succeed. But again, there was one problem: his temper. He was known for being extremely volatile. One time, he was stung by a bee. Instead of simply dealing with it, he became furious and destroyed the entire beehive. On another occasion, his son made a small mistake while writing a character. Instead of correcting him calmly, Wang Fuxi became so enraged that he bit his own son's arm until it bled. Think about that for a moment. When anger reaches that level, it doesn't just harm others. It reveals a complete loss of control. Despite his talent, Wang Fuxi's career never reached its full potential. His behavior made people distance themselves from him. Opportunities slipped away. And in the end, he died in loneliness and poverty. Now compare that to another official from the same era, Pei Du. Pei Du also faced challenges and setbacks. His path wasn't easy, but he had something Wang Fuxi didn't: emotional stability. He was known for being calm, humble, and composed. Even when he held great authority, he never became arrogant. Even when facing difficulties, he didn't lose his temper. Because of this, he earned respect. He built trust. And over time, his steady character allowed him to rise and succeed. History makes one thing very clear: talent alone is not enough. Without the right temperament, even the most gifted person can reach a dead end. Now let's look at this from another perspective: your energy, your field of influence. In many philosophies, it's believed that each person carries a kind of invisible energy. When your inner state is balanced and positive, that energy attracts supportive people and favorable circumstances. This idea is often connected to what people call the law of attraction, whether you interpret it spiritually or psychologically. The principle is simple: you tend to attract what you project. If you carry anger, negativity, and tension, you'll often encounter more of the same. But if you cultivate calmness, kindness, and patience, your environment begins to reflect those qualities back to you. There's a simple way to think about it. If you're right, there's no need to be angry. If you're wrong, you don't have the right to be angry. Either way, anger doesn't help. And beyond relationships and success, there's another area where your temper has a profound impact. Your health. Modern research increasingly shows that our emotional state is deeply connected to our physical well-being. Chronic stress, anxiety, and anger don't just stay in the mind, they affect the body. There's a book called Deadly Emotions that explores this connection in detail. It points out that certain emotional patterns are linked to specific health issues. For example, prolonged anxiety has been associated with digestive problems, like irritable bowel syndrome. Chronic anger has been linked to high blood pressure and heart disease. Persistent panic can even affect heart function. In other words, negative emotions can quietly become a kind of internal toxin. You might not notice the damage immediately, but over time, it builds. That's why taking care of your health isn't just about what you eat or how much you exercise. It's also about how you manage your inner world, learning to calm your mind, to release anger, to let go of unnecessary stress. These are forms of self-protection. Sometimes, the best medicine isn't something you take, it's something you release. Now, as we come toward the end, let's simplify everything into one final idea. In life, there are really only 3 types of business you can focus on: your own business, other people's business, and what some call God's business things beyond your control. Most of our stress comes from mixing these up. We worry about what others are doing. We try to control outcomes that are not ours to control. We carry burdens that don't belong to us. But the more you focus on your own life, your actions, your mindset, your growth, the lighter everything becomes. Life is a bit like carrying a suitcase. When you need it, you pick it up. When you don't, you set it down. But if you insist on dragging it everywhere, even when it's not necessary, you'll exhaust yourself. Emotional baggage works the same way. If you hold on to every frustration, every grudge, every moment of anger, you make your journey unnecessarily heavy. But if you learn to let go, to release, to move on, life becomes lighter. There's a line from the Taishan Ganyin Pian that says, "Disaster and blessing have no doors. You must invite them yourself." In other words, the way you live, your choices, your reactions, your temperament determines what enters your life. So starting today, try this. Be a little more patient, a little more tolerant. Replace the urge to argue with the choice to understand. Replace anger with calm, because when your heart is no longer filled with frustration or rage, something changes. You begin to experience a deeper kind of peace. Not the kind that depends on everything going your way, but the kind that comes from within, no matter what happens outside. And that is the beginning of a truly fulfilling life. If controlling your emotions is a form of strength, then mastering your temper is a lifelong practice. And throughout history, we've seen countless examples of how a person's temperament can either destroy their path or completely transform it. One of the most powerful examples comes from a well-known historical figure, Zheng Guofan. In his early years, Zheng Guofan was nothing like the calm and wise leader people remember today. In fact, he had a notoriously bad temper. He would argue over the smallest issues, lose patience easily, and push people away without even realizing it. His relationships suffered, and his career struggled. At one point, after a series of failures in his official career, he lost his position and authority. Defeated, he returned to his hometown and spent 3 years there. But instead of finding peace, he carried his anger with him. He lashed out at those around him, his family, his siblings, even his servants. Everything irritated him. Everything felt wrong. And for a long time, he blamed everyone else for his situation. Until one day, a close friend gave him a piece of honest advice. The friend told him something simple but powerful. Perhaps the problem wasn't the world, it was him. That idea hit hard. For the first time, Zhang Gofan began to reflect on himself. He started to see a pattern. His failures, his broken relationships, his constant frustration, they were all connected to one thing: his temper. He realized that a person who cannot control their anger is often creating their own hardships. So, he made a decision. Instead of trying to change others, he would change himself. When he eventually returned to public life, people noticed something completely different. He was calmer, more patient, more humble. He listened more and reacted less. He treated others with respect and empathy, and as his temperament changed, so did his destiny. His career flourished. He gained trust, built strong alliances, and rose to the highest ranks of the empire. The same man who once struggled because of his temper became successful because he learned to master it. This transformation teaches us something important. When your mind is calm, everything flows more smoothly. But when anger takes over, it's like lighting a fire that burns not only others, but yourself as well. Anger rarely solves problems. More often, it creates new ones. And yet many people still believe that losing their temper shows strength. That being loud, aggressive, or dominant will somehow give them control. But in reality, it does the opposite. A person who can conquer their anger is far stronger than someone who conquers cities. Now let's bring this closer to home, your family, because nowhere is temperament more important than within the people you live with every day. In a household, having a partner with a good temper is one of the greatest blessings you can have. When both people are patient and understanding, the entire environment changes. There's less tension, fewer arguments, more warmth, more trust. There's an old saying, a harmonious family prospers in all things. And it's true, harmony doesn't just make life more pleasant, it creates a foundation for growth, stability, and happiness. But what's even more important is how this affects children. Children don't just listen to what you say, they absorb how you behave. If a mother has a calm and steady temperament, the children naturally develop emotional stability. They feel safe. They learn how to process their own feelings in a healthy way. If a father is patient and gentle, the children grow up with a sense of security. They don't live in fear of sudden anger or harsh reactions. These influences are subtle, but incredibly powerful. Over time, they shape a child's personality, their confidence, and even how they treat others in the future. In other words, your temper doesn't just affect you, it shapes the next generation. A good temper is like an invisible asset. It doesn't cost anything, but it brings tremendous returns. It reduces conflict, strengthens relationships, and opens doors that might otherwise remain closed. When you don't create unnecessary friction, your path in life naturally becomes smoother. There's also an interesting perspective from a legendary figure known as the White Dragon King in Thailand. Many people would come to him with questions about their future. They would ask, will my career succeed? Will my family be harmonious? What about my relationships? But instead of giving complicated answers, he would often respond with just one question. Is your temper good? Because in his view, that single trait could determine the outcome of everything else. If your temper is stable, you handle challenges better. If your temper is calm, your relationships improve. If your temper is gentle, opportunities come more easily. In other words, your inner state shapes your outer reality. Let me share another story, a simple fable, but one with a deep message. There was once a man who had a peculiar habit. Whenever he got angry, instead of arguing or reacting, he would run around his property 3 times. At first, his land was very small. Just a modest home and a bit of land around it. Each time he felt anger rising, he would run around his property and think to himself, my home is so small. My land is so limited. What right do I have to waste time being angry at others? And just like that, his anger would fade. Instead of arguing, he would return to his work. He focused on improving his life, little by little. Years passed. Through consistent effort and discipline, his land grew. His wealth increased. His life improved. But interestingly, he never gave up that habit. Even when he became old and his estate had become vast, he still did the same thing. Whenever anger appeared, he would walk around his land. But now his thoughts had changed. He would say to himself, "My home is so large. My land is so vast. Why should I lower myself to argue with others?" And once again, his anger would disappear. One day, his grandson asked him, "Grandfather, you have more land than anyone around here. Why do you still walk around it whenever you get angry?" The old man smiled and explained everything. And in that moment, the lesson became clear. Whether you have little or much, anger always costs you something. When you have little, anger wastes the time you could use to build something. When you have much, anger risks destroying what you've already built. Victory often comes from tolerance. Failure often begins with uncontrolled anger. And only those who understand contentment can truly live in peace. So as you move through life, remember this. You don't always control what happens to you, but you always have a choice in how you respond. And that choice, again and again, shapes the direction of your entire life. Welcome to Ancient Wisdom, everyone. There's a powerful idea I want to start with today. If you really pay attention, you can often predict a person's destiny just by observing their character. As it's written in Liao Fan's 4 lessons, all things shift according to the mind, and realms are born from the heart. In other words, the life you live is deeply shaped by the state of your inner world. Different personalities lead to different outcomes. If your mind is steady, your life tends to unfold smoothly. But when your mind is restless, things begin to fall apart. A chaotic mind leads to poor decisions, and those decisions often bring unnecessary suffering. Think about it: when emotions take over, logic disappears. An uneasy mind gives rise to unstable emotions. And once you lose control of your emotions, they begin to control you. At that point, it's no longer you deciding your life. It's your anger, your fear, your impulses. That's why emotions can be one of the greatest temptations within the human heart. They feel powerful, immediate, even justified, but they can also quietly destroy everything if left unchecked. Learning to manage your emotions isn't just a skill. It's a foundation for a fulfilling life. Let me tell you a story. There was once a man who lived in extreme poverty. He wasn't particularly intelligent, and his life reflected that: simple, difficult, and full of struggle. But one day, something unexpected happened. After a heavy rainstorm, part of his old house collapsed. As he began clearing the debris, he discovered something unbelievable hidden within the ruins: a pot filled with gold. Overnight, his life changed. From poverty to wealth, just like that. But despite his sudden fortune, he felt uneasy. Deep down, he knew that money didn't equal wisdom. He worried that without intelligence, he might lose everything just as quickly as he gained it. So he decided to seek guidance from a Zen master. When he found the master, he explained his situation and asked for advice. The master looked at him calmly and said, "You have money. Others have wisdom. Why not use your money to buy wisdom?" The man took this very seriously. He traveled to the city, searching for someone who could sell him wisdom. Eventually, he found a monk and asked directly, "Can you sell me your wisdom?" The monk replied, "My wisdom is very expensive. One sentence will cost you 1,000 taels of silver." Now, most people would hesitate, but not this man. He said, "If it truly is wisdom, I'm willing to pay any price." So the monk gave him a single piece of advice. When you encounter a difficult situation, don't rush to act. Take 3 steps forward, then 3 steps back. Repeat this 3 times. In doing so, wisdom will reveal itself. The man was skeptical. It sounded too simple, almost meaningless. But since he had already committed, he accepted it. The monk noticed his doubt and added, "Go home first. If you find this advice useless, you don't need to come back. But if you find it valuable, then return and pay me." That night, a man returned home. As he entered his house quietly in the dark, he noticed something strange. There was someone lying in bed with his wife. In an instant, rage exploded inside him. His mind went blank. His heart pounded. Without thinking, he grabbed a knife, ready to kill both of them on the spot. But just as he was about to act, something flashed in his mind. The monk's words, "Take 3 steps forward, then 3 steps back." In that moment, he paused, reluctantly. He took 3 steps forward, then 3 steps back. Again, dash forward, then back. And a third time. As he moved back and forth, the person lying beside his wife suddenly woke up and spoke. "My son, what are you doing in the middle of the night?" The man froze. That voice, it was unmistakable. It was his mother. Shock rushed through his entire body. The knife slipped from his hand. His anger vanished instantly, replaced by fear and realization. If he had acted even a second earlier, if he hadn't paused, he would have killed his own mother. The next morning, he went straight back to the monk and paid him the 1,000 taels without hesitation. Because in that moment, he understood something deeply. That single sentence hadn't just saved his money, it had saved his life, his family, and his soul. Now, think about how often we face situations like this. Maybe not as extreme, but emotionally just as intense. Conflicts at work, arguments at home, misunderstandings with friends. Even small things, an offhand comment, a delay, a disagreement, can trigger strong emotional reactions. And in those moments, we feel the urge to react immediately. To speak sharply. To act quickly. To prove a point. But here's the truth. Emotions are temporary. No matter how intense they feel, they always pass. The problem is, the consequences of our actions don't pass so easily. A harsh word can damage a relationship for years. An impulsive decision can cost you opportunities you'll never get back. Moment of anger can lead to a lifetime of regret. That's why emotional control is so important. It's not about suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. It's about creating space between the feeling and the reaction. It's about giving yourself just enough time to choose a better response. Because when you control your emotions, you take back control of your life. There's an old saying, the more impatient a person is, the less wisdom they have. The bigger the temper, the worse the health. The gentler the temper, the deeper the blessings. In many ways, your temper and your blessings move in opposite directions. When one rises, the other falls. Losing your temper might feel powerful in the moment, but in reality, it's often a sign of weakness. True strength lies in restraint. Anyone can react, but not everyone can pause. Not everyone can step back, reflect, and choose a wiser path. And that's exactly what separates those who struggle from those who thrive. So the next time you feel anger rising, remember the man and the monk. Take a step forward, then a step back, and give wisdom a chance to catch up with your emotions.